What up, Hyperchange? Welcome to another episode. Today we have an epic show lined up. We are doing a virtual influencers. I have Luke Pappas on the line from NEA. What up, Luke?
Hey, what's going on, man?
Not much. You've been on the show before. You are a VC at NEA, always looking at sort of the future of technology, ahead of the curve, really with your ear to the ground on the startup ecosystem. And we were sort of jamming on this idea of virtual influencers like Lil Michaela. I made a video about that. And just this idea that a personal brand could be bigger than like a corporate brand sort of in the future. And that's an area where you're spending a lot of time. So I'm really excited to dive into this topic today. Maybe you could give us a little bit of background of what fascinated you about what's happening in the virtual influencer space, and how did this get on your radar?
Yeah, for sure. So I can tell you, this is a huge thesis for us at NEA. We look at a few things. First of all, you think about the kind of the fundamental platforms that exist, across social media, digital media, names like Facebook, names like Netflix, apps like YouTube, Instagram. These channels of distribution have existed for decades now. And if you look at the followership and the ease of getting content out to an audience, it's never been easier. And so for us, being early stage investors, we're looking at all these different technology companies and thinking about what is the next generation of business model. And it's tough if you're a startup trying to build a new platform to compete with these, entrenched tech companies that have hundreds of, millions of followers in some cases. And audiences. And so for us, we're thinking about these kind of additional, how do you build on top of these existing platforms, and what are the next business models that take advantage of these layers? And a huge opportunity that we see is, as you put it, digital influencer space.
And I think that's an amazing kind of thesis, because that's something I built my entire company and business around. Hyperchange. Like, yes, we're monetizing just with YouTube ads, probably really underpriced right now, and Patreon, but I have an Instagram account, I have a Twitter account, I'm on Spotify, I'm not monetizing the podcast version of my content. So when I think about setting up like a brand, like I'm just trying to maximize distribution. And like you said, like Netflix, all these platforms we mentioned, to me are just such early in the infancy of allowing the monetization and like kind of power of the distribution. So I feel like it's still so early in those days. And one of the really interesting, you mentioned like new business models coming up. And one, I know that you're an investor, and that's kind of a controversial but really funny one to me, is Goop. Because I always heard of Goop and was like, what is this? Like, I'm in New York, I live in Soho. My friends are like, we're always walking around the Goop store, like making jokes about it. But then I saw the Netflix show Goop, and I was like, wow, this is actually like, I was hating on it, but it's like interesting. Like, I don't know. I'm not a Goop fan, but this is a fascinating business case study that you've been kind of on the front lines with that fits exactly in this thesis. So I'm curious if you could like fill us in on a little bit on the Goop story and background.
Yeah, for sure. Goop, as you mentioned, very polarizing brand. And I think you hit on this. It's polarizing because those that don't understand really the ethos of the company, it seems like you've got this brand that's pushing products, and some of the products are definitely out there and attention grabbers for sure. For us, like Goop really fits in the thesis of content-driven commerce. And what really matters, I think, the more you dig into the company, you'll realize this, is it's authentic content. The company was born around Gwyneth Paltrow's newsletter that she would share with, really it began with her friends. Like she had a few recipes that she was, around the holiday season, she was sharing with friends about different dishes she was cooking. And just through honestly, the viral network of content, friends shared with other friends, and the newsletter grew and grew and grew. And you had this authentic community that was really just seeking out different ideas around food, around fashion, around lifestyle. And so we were fortunate to partner with Gwyneth really at the earliest days and put a business around her newsletter. And that's grown into what you see today in Goop. But what I think is really unique, and we're seeing this more and more kind of in the modern day commerce model, is this idea of content-driven commerce. And Goop is a pioneer in this, where you're not necessarily thinking about, okay, what product am I going to sell? You're thinking about the content piece first. And with Goop, it's all about education. The part of the mission of the company is experimenting and trying out things that other people maybe don't have the financial flexibility to try, or maybe the adventurousness to go and try. Like Goop's mission is, we'll go and try this out and we'll share the learnings with you. And if we believe in a product and we realize a benefit from it, we're going to tell you about that. That's going to be our content. And then you can engage in that content. And then we'll also, there's a secondary piece, which is the commerce piece, but it's all driven by content, by exploration, by learning. And I think you hit on that when you watched the Netflix special. That really comes to the forefront. And so for us, it's an exciting, I mean, that was kind of an early investment for us in our consumer portfolio. And now as we think about content-driven commerce, and, you know, we're on our 17th fund at NEA, consumer investing is a big priority for us. And this idea of content-driven commerce is really one of our leading theses.
And I'm curious, like, you know, what's the business model of Goop? Because it's so fascinating the way it just starts with this little newsletter, then they have a store in Soho, and then what you're kind of saying, this content drives the commerce aspect, which is they're launching products, which maybe that's their moneymaker. I'm kind of curious of like, what's the overarching vision that ties this all together? Is it just the one kind of tastemaker, Gwyneth Paltrow, who then, you know, the thing she likes happens to turn into this crazy multi-billion-dollar brand? Like, it's almost hard to wrap your head around, but that it almost feels like she's the tastemaker of this movement, which kind of has all these ancillary businesses and product ideas.
Yeah, the way we think about it, I mean, you hear this word a lot, especially around consumer, is a lifestyle brand. And so I think if you were to put a word on the business model and how the company is structured, it's a content-driven commerce company, and that content is about a specific lifestyle. Now, not everyone is going to ascribe to this lifestyle, right? But if you, and you don't have to completely, like, you're not 100% bought into it, but there are bits and pieces you may pull. So for example, I don't wear a lot of the fashion that Goop will recommend, but there are certain recipes that I find interesting, right? And I'll maybe make those in my kitchen. So it appeals to me in that way. So the lifestyle component, there's all these different, you have kitchen, you have fashion, you have health and wellness, mental health, all these different components that make up a healthy lifestyle or someone's, you know, lifestyle. In the Goop's context, it's largely shaped around Gwyneth. That is, you know, from the earliest days, that was Goop's brand. And so if you think about a lifestyle company, you know, in this kind of model, that's what Goop is, for, you know, in our minds. You can see this though in a bunch of other different categories. A good example, kind of the similar model, but a much different market, is 100 Thieves. That is a lifestyle company for the gaming category. When we talk about different ways that you can ultimately monetize this, you have a lifestyle brand, which the content is supporting and which ultimately furthering. But there are a lot of things you can do when you have that really powerful content engine. You can do in-person experiences. You mentioned the Goop store you walk around. And one of the things about Goop, like the revenue per square foot, incredibly strong numbers because of how powerful the content is and how like targeted the community is. So you have your in-person experiences, you have your digital experiences. You know, we aren't really offering a digital content subscription model. All the content is largely free. But you can imagine, like, just with, like, you know, you look at what Substack is empowering creators to do. You look at Patreon as another example. Like, there's a lot of great precedent for building subscription-based digital content companies. And if you have a powerful brand, a powerful lifestyle company like Goop or like 100 Thieves, you can imagine building a digital subscription component to that as well. You know, we're investing in really high production value content with the Netflix special as another example. And then the third piece, which is, you know, the biggest piece of Goop's business today, is the commerce piece. And that's largely e-commerce, you know, driving sales through the website and other channels. But that's kind of the third leg of the business model.
I'm really fascinated because you mentioned 100 Thieves, and they're like this gaming kind of merch store, like, but it's like a video game brand. Could you give us like a rundown of like 100 Thieves and Goop, and like, are a couple other in this category that you think are like these sort of new business model brands? Because I'm so fascinated by, you know, who's kind of leading in this space that we should be watching.
Yeah, well, 100 Thieves and Goop, I think, are two great examples. Really, what it comes down to, like, anyone can really build. You can build a business like 100 Thieves or like Goop if you have a powerful brand. I think what people are realizing across media, we're increasingly in venture capital, especially in the consumer venture capitalists, is brand really matters. I mean, even at the VC level, like, you've got VCs that are very aggressive about marketing their brand and what their fund stands for, and you know, why entrepreneurs should work with them. And so brand has never been more powerful than it is today. And if you think about a company like Goop or like 100 Thieves, you know, they're all built around this notion of a consistent, unified brand. And what's happening right now is, like, to bring it back to influencers, like, Gwyneth was one person that led to a company around her, which is Goop. You look at TikTok as an example. It's never been easier to go from no followers to hundreds of thousands of followers or audience members overnight. I have a good friend who He literally posted a TikTok videos, maybe 10 seconds, and he was analyzing baseball mechanics for pitchers. It was just never posted a video before. Overnight, he got 200,000 views on his TikTok for that one video. Like, that is unheard of before. And so if you build a consistent brand and you leverage these tools like TikTok for distribution, you can build, if you have a consistent narrative, you can build an audience of engaged community, and all of a sudden that community turns into a business. If you think about it, from that lens, and you're consistent with your content and your messaging. So, but the ease with which you can start things, and this is actually something we're focused on at NEA, is there's a huge opportunity here. The economics make sense, and the potential revenue side, the audience size is really, really huge.
Yeah, and I wonder what you think about the thesis of I think it's pointless to invest in advertising, but it's everything to invest in content. And so why would you invest in the distribution to get your ad to someone when the distribution on all these channels is free? Like, if you have a good and amazing piece of content about your brand, people will come to you and find it. And so that's why I think is totally lagging behind, is no company should be paying for advertising or content distribution, which is advertising. They should pay for content creation. And that's why I think, and I see the budgets making a massive shift there, which is why I'm so bullish on this space, because that's going to go into all the virtual influencers. They're not paying for marketing for Cheetos advertising. They're paying to digitize the Flamin' Hot Cheetos guy and have him start a Twitter account and start putting Instagram videos out. And so I think this is totally exciting in the future of where everything's headed. And so I'm curious of what you kind of think about that, and how you see like these big brands like that Cheeto example kind of making those moves too.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, we're seeing a tremendous amount of collaboration between big brands, big companies that want to reach audiences, and then influencers who have their own brand, their own audience. And there's a lot of cross-pollination happening. We invested in a company. I haven't mentioned this before. So we launched a fund, actually. We believe in this so much at NEA that we partnered with a firm in LA, one of the biggest talent agencies in the world, CAA, the Creative Artist Agency, on a joint venture, which we are calling Connect Ventures. And the thesis of that fund is really to invest what we say the intersection of culture and commerce. One of our first investments is a company called Black Tag. Two entrepreneurs who have spent the early part of their career working with a lot of really large brands on specific brand campaigns and media campaigns, so on and so forth. And the thesis behind Black Tag is to create a platform with an emphasis on Black content creators working in collaborations, with large brands, and different partnerships around content creation to create a channel to distribute this content to audience members. And then ultimately, a core part of the thesis behind Black Tag is to ensure the economics of that content. That's all the revenue that being driven by that content is shared back to the creators themselves, which is a big part of the differentiation of this company. But you talk about just the interest since we launched. They did the announcement of the fundraise a few weeks ago, and literally it was the highest trafficked announcement that we've ever seen at NEA, and the amount of brand outreach to this company. And it's literally a 2-person team today. They've raised a couple $1 million, but the product is very, very early. But the desire for brands to work with this type of thesis has never been stronger. So we're really excited to invest behind not only Black Tag, but many other companies to come. I think it's a matter of authenticity. You can run a huge ad campaign, but to the end consumer, consumers are smart and they realize, hey, this doesn't really feel like it's authentic. But if you have kind of that natural fit between a brand, a company that's trying to reach an audience, and an influencer who has an engaged and genuine relationship with their community and with their fans, that's where you kind of realize that lift beyond just a traditional advertisement. It feels much more natural, much more genuine, and it speaks to the audience.
You mentioned authenticity, and that's one thing that I think is really basically the biggest differentiator for all of this. And one thing that I was following who was interesting was Lil Miquela, who was the first coolest Instagram influencer I made that was virtual. And she was this avatar. You didn't know if it was a person behind her. It ended up being this kind of startup company that actually raised a bunch of VC money, but she hit 1 million followers and was really, really popular and booming, and then just totally fizzled, started putting out music videos that weren't that good. And I thought it was so interesting because I thought she had so much potential. And then the second, she tried to monetize and try to do something cool, it totally flopped because of no authenticity. So I thought that was a really interesting moment for this whole space. And I'm curious if you were following that and had any thoughts on the Lil Miquela kind of case study.
Yeah, we've been following it from the very beginning, and we're fascinated by the potential. If you think about, take a step back and think about influencers. Before the advent of the digital, like Lil Miquela style influencer, we're people, right? We age. We're not perfect. We're going to make mistakes. We might say something that we don't, necessarily agree with, and all of a sudden that's in the press, in the news, and all picked up by a bunch of articles, right? So you may be like a massive celebrity, and there's still risks involved with your personal brand, things that you may happen to you, so on and so forth. The potential of a digital, like truly digital influencer, like a Lil Miquela, is that you could control 100% of the narrative. You control the appearance, you control what that influencer, what values they stand for, what things they get behind, what messages they share with their audience, and that's really intriguing. And not only that, but like you're never going to age. You can literally exist in perpetuity. So the thinking about that in the context of kind of, we've had celebrities, we've had influencers really throughout the history of human history. But we've never had, this, the option to control something 100% like a Lil Miquela style influencer. And so it's still the early days. I think we're understanding, people are understanding and learning about how to, I mean, you mentioned kind of the rise, and then there was a bit of a fall off, and some volatility in kind of the more recent history around Lil Miquela. But I think with any kind of new innovation, and this is definitely an innovation when it comes to influencers, there's going to be a learning curve, and so we're following it closely. If you just look at Lil Miquela, like that profile itself, there were a lot of brands, bringing it back to brands when I work with influencers, that had some very interesting collaborations with her. I think that speaks again the power of an influencer, X brand collaboration, and reaching an audience that has self-identified with that influencer. So what matters to them. Kind of how to message a specific product. Before, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we didn't have the creative tools to make visually appealing content like Lil Miquela is today. And the content is beautiful. Like if you look at her Instagram posts and you just take a glancing look, you might not realize it's created digitally. Like the ability for us to create really engaging, lifelike content has never been better. And the tools today that we have kind of crossed that uncanny valley almost, where it feels natural. It feels like it's someone you might cross on the street. So yeah, there's a lot of factors that have been building to kind of where we are today, and I think it's the early days of this digital kind of synthetic influencer.
Yeah, one really interesting case that I was following was Grimes, because she kind of I had this weird sort of statement a while ago where she didn't want to keep touring. I think it was because maybe she was having a baby or something, but wanted to have this sort of brand that was her, like a digital avatar that could do concerts, that was her, that was her artist. I don't know. I fully, it's like too next level for me to understand. It was kind of this idea that she had her own digital avatar that wasn't exactly herself, that wasn't tied to her body, but was still influenced by her. And to me, that's the perfect hybrid of where I was like, that's going to crack the code. Like Lil Miquela doesn't have that authenticity, but if it's Lil Miquela with like Grimes, this real person behind it, kind of create, and Grimes is that creative visionary. To me, that's kind of like it's like, oh, we're just creating a virtual influencer. It's like way more than that. To me, this is as much art as like doing a painting would be to create the virtual influencer. It's just we don't appreciate it like that. But so I'm curious if you thought about that case study, because when I heard Grimes doing that, I was like, this is what I could see the future of artists doing. And then you die and you still have this kind of thing that can do performances and people can interact with in some way.
Yeah, it's great that you bring that up, because we've actually spent the last maybe 6 months, obviously with everything with COVID, live events and music, the music category specifically has been hit very hard. Concerts have been shut down. Performers aren't able to perform in person. And so I mentioned our Connect Ventures, fund that we started with CAA. Music is a big part of CAA's business, and they have a number of, a big part of their roster of talent is in the category. We've been spending, a good part of the last 5 to 6 months thinking about what are ways in which we can bring the power and the joy of live events, especially music related events, to audiences that are craving it today, and allow artists and creators to connect with their fans. And so there's been a huge amount of innovation just in the last half a year around virtual event platforms. You look at what Hopin is doing for like big corporate events, right? That's one category. There's a company called Maestro, which makes a really powerful technology solution, which a number of artists and musicians have been using to connect with their fans. Melissa Etheridge is a good example. She's been doing a concert a day powered by Maestro, where she's playing in her garage and streaming it to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of fans every day. And there are, as you mentioned, kind of the digital side of things. There's another company, I'm blanking on the name, but they basically you record in a green room, and what's on display in front of everybody is a virtual. It's an avatar, right? And so it moves along with your body, but it isn't your person on the screen. It's your avatar. There have been some really big artists that have demoed the product and have done actually a few events with their for their fans with this. And I think it's going to be something that we're going to see a lot more of, not so much to replace live events, hopefully in a post-COVID world, but to augment them. If you think about doing a concert, for example, in LA, if I live in the UK, I can't attend that concert in person, right? So all the fans in LA can go to it, but for the fans around the world that might want to share in that experience, you don't have the ability to do that today unless you're streaming on YouTube or something like that. So there's an opportunity to leverage the tech being built today for this COVID specific use case to add and increase the market opportunity around live events and music specifically is a good example. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of innovation out of necessity today, but could be really interesting new use cases that we don't anticipate. And the digital, kind of to tie it all back, the digital avatar, like that is a core part of a lot of these different platforms that are being built. Another interesting company around the kind of the digital avatar space is Genies, which we're actually investors in. Kind of similar to Bitmoji back in the day, creates just a digital avatar for people, and which the amount of inbound demand for that company for people saying, hey, I want to have my Genies, has been huge. And you kind of see the Genies popping up all over the place. A lot of them are Zoom like pictures if they don't have a camera on, but yeah, there's a lot of this.
My friend is telling me about Genies and was so hyped about it. So it's funny you mentioned that, and he was like, bro, you got to check this out. So yeah. The other thing that you came to mind was the Travis Scott Fortnite concert, where like Travis Scott did a concert in Fortnite that like 100, I think this was like a while ago, but like 100 million people went or something insane. And I was like, that is so cool, because what like this virtual, you being in UK and trying to go to LA concert, to me, it's like live streaming on like a laptop is such a crappy, not the true final form of this. It's like VR, I'm in this room where everyone else is like like I don't even have to be me. I could be an avatar of my, whatever. And then I'm in a concert. Like, I don't know. That's kind of how like the future of music is, almost like these dance clubs, everyone's dancing by themselves in their own home. Like, but I don't know. I see so much potential there.
Like Fortnite, first of all, talk about the cultural power of, and tying again back to brand power, like the brand of Fortnite and how much it's infused into pop culture with all the different dances and soundtracks and all this stuff. Like it is a huge part of our culture today. And I think if you look at like the opportunity, Travis Scott's team is fantastic, probably one of the best in the business about thinking about these new innovative ways to get that content, his brand, out to his fans and his audience. Like, what an amazing event, right? And that event, could you picture that 10 years ago? Absolutely not. But now, like, you've got this massive online multiplayer game that's virtual, and you've got people, not just music, right? You've got major NBA players that are after the game, they're streaming themselves playing Fortnite with their friends or whatever it is. They're connecting with their fans through Twitch and Discord and whatever it might be. Like, culturally, like, there is a huge infusion happening, not just around Fortnite, but with these large digital communities, these digital platforms. And the concert you mentioned is just a huge example of the potential of what can happen.
Yeah, and I think a lot of older kind of like the Wall Street financial part of the world is missing that the culture is happening on Fortnite. Like, that's what I almost realized. Like that Travis Scott Fortnite thing, like that was the coolest concert to go to, even though it was digital, or almost like, or it seems like we're pushing in that direction. And I don't know, to me, it's so interesting to see that like gaming has really become the pioneer of pushing us almost to hang out in the virtual worlds, which to me is just a competition of Facebook and Instagram in some ways. And so I'm curious how like gaming ties into all this. Like I'm actually an investor in this company called Rainbow Wallet, which is like an Ethereum. I call it like Coinbase for weird things. But my favorite thing about it is like cool little tokens built in the Ethereum blockchain. I have this vision of like people trading limited edition Fortnite skins and like digital tokenized assets that could be, you know, limited edition that are for like your virtual digital character. And so when I see how this is evolving, and that's like perfect, you know, Fortnite has all these limited edition skins that maybe you could trade. So I see so much like culture and the future kind of happening there. And it's so weird to think that digital assets would have value, that virtual influencers would be worth millions of dollars. But it seems like that's already here. And like, yeah, I don't know. I'm just kind of, I don't know if that rant made sense. But
I might talk too long, so interrupt me.
No, go for it.
We have a phrase that we've said at NEA for ever since I've been there. We say gaming is the next iteration of social. You kind of think about the evolution of different social platforms as they've come and gone. Gaming, if you talk to people and teenagers and the coming generations, and you ask them what they do when they come home from school, they're firing up a Discord server, they're logging into Fortnite, and they're playing with their friends and interacting and communicating with them on these digital channels. And that's where, like, when I came home from school, I would log into Facebook and, say hi to friends that way or chat, with people that way. Now it's Discord. Now it's Fortnite. Now it's, these digital gaming channels. And so we really believe, we have a strong thesis that gaming is really it is a social, channel today, and it will only get bigger and grow from here. You talked about digital collectibles, and if you think about like the sports collectible market, that's tens of billions of dollars of value traded every year. Huge market. And the thing about that same opportunity is going to happen in gaming, but the beautiful thing is, talk about the margin here, right? It costs you virtually nothing to make a new skin, to make a new collectible, digital collectible for a game, because it's all digital, right? There's no cost of goods. There's no physical cost of goods. So your margins now, with what can become a multi-billion-dollar market, you've got virtually, 100% gross margins, which is unheard of, right? So a huge opportunity around kind of that specific use case which you hit on, that we're really focused on, and companies that are being built here to do that. One of the use cases we believe blockchain is probably the best suited for, tracking digital ownership across for a digital good. So we're excited about that. And then I think, again, to tie it back to influencers, especially and connect it to gaming, you look at someone like Ninja, who almost 2 years ago, no one really knew who he was, right? And now, I don't remember exactly which publication it was, but they put out these stats, and he is the most globally recognized athlete. If you consider, and we consider, gamers.
No way. That's crazy.
The most globally recognized athlete, more so than Cristiano Ronaldo and Messi. Like, that is insane to think about, right? And it happened in less than 2 years. That's the power of gaming. That's the opportunity that we see. The market has been massive for a long time, but the impact on culture has never been greater. And so we're really, really excited. We've invested in a few companies, one called PlayVersus, which is bringing esports and gaming to high schools, colleges, and building kind of the democratizing, competitive gaming for everyone who's not a professional. So really exciting company out of LA, amazing founder. We were fortunate to be Series A investors in that company, and really excited about what they can do and build. And then we also backed a company called Gen G, which is a professional esports team. We are very bullish on the gaming category.
How do you back an esports team? Like, what's the thought? Did you like get the gamer in a room and like give him an Xbox challenge and like see how good he did, or?
No, so that we backed. There's a parent company that owns, across a bunch of different titles, League of Legends, probably the biggest title today, but there's a bunch that they all have different teams that compete in. But effectively, the parent company owns franchises across all these different gaming titles, and then we'll field a team in each of them. And the investment that we made goes to support the training facility and, it's like owning, it's exactly the same as owning a professional sports team in Major League Baseball or the NBA or the NFL, where you're supporting all the operations, and then all the revenue that comes, league revenue that comes into to an NFL franchise. It's the same for gaming, right? You've got advertising revenue coming in, you have merchandise sales coming in, you have prize pools from winning, various tournaments and challenges. So yeah, we're very bullish.
I was arguing with my dad the other day, being like, we're watching football, and I'm like, I don't even like football anymore. Like, I was a diehard Seahawks fan, and I'm watching the game, and I'm like, dude, like, it's built for cable. Like, it's 50 minutes of gameplay in 3 hours. There's constantly an ad. They're interrupting. The flow's super low. Like, these announcers are like so bored and yawning. I don't know if it was because of COVID. I was like, can I just switch a button and just switch to like some crazy YouTuber kid to announce the game? Like, what are we doing here? Like, it was just such a bad, archaic legacy media entertainment product when I thought about sports. And so I don't even think people realize how dead sports are in the water. The more and more I thought about it, it's like, baseball's not getting more fun to watch. Football's not innovating, but every single year, the graphics and the competition and the money and the production value and the easeability to communicate with your friends and watch that sports content get better. It's almost like internal combustion engine flat, EVs getting better, like that inflection point. To me, it's the same, like normal sports, just like chilling, esports, just crushing it and getting way better. And like you said, that Ninja stat feels like I'm already like, esports is going to win. It sounds like that moment already happened with Ninja. And I'm kind of curious, like switching gears to this influencer, kind of sports are dead, but the only cool thing happening in sports right now is Jake Paul boxing. And so I think this is hilarious and just fascinating that the Jake and Logan Paul have gone into boxing and they're doing pay-per-view boxing content. They're probably making way more than on YouTube with it, like that same thing. Like, you're a creator, how to use these platforms once you get your brand to monetize this weird, like one-off live event. I think that's a business that Zoom should get into, is helping people do that really easily. But I'm curious if you've looked into the kind of Jake Paul boxing world and the business model behind that as well.
I'll be honest, I haven't actually. I don't know much about it.
No, it's cool. It's fascinating. I just can't believe that.
I saw some of the clips.
I'm like, who am I going to box? I'm like waiting to call out like David Einhorn, like on some of these Tesla shorts, but I feel like it wouldn't be fair, but I don't know.
I mean, I think if I were to say, I don't know the specific, like I don't follow Jake Paul like religiously, and so I don't know exactly what happened there. But if you just take a step back and think about how to garner views today as a content creator, like increasingly what we're seeing is more and more extreme content is like appealing to specific audiences. And so we've kind of, as we've looked at this landscape, if you think like 10, 15 years ago, because you didn't have as powerful of distribution as we have today, like you couldn't open up your phone and it's like, have all your communities organized and all your different apps and like pull up a YouTube video or pull up an Instagram page, like that volume of content didn't exist before. And so what you had very vanilla communities, right? You had much larger communities of people, and what they were ultimately organizing around were much more vanilla concepts, much more vanilla content. Today, like communities are becoming much more polarized. They're becoming much tighter, becoming a little bit smaller. Like the size of the audience is coming down for like these highly targeted communities, but they're much more targeted. And so I think like that might be one thing that you kind of see with, Jake Paul as an example, like these very, very extreme, like in your face, like out there units of content, and maybe they don't appeal to everybody, but what it is allowing is like the coalescing of very tight communities around very tight subjects. And honestly, a great example of this is what's happening in our political world, right? You've got kind of the fracturing of what used to be a two-party system, and more and more extreme policies on both sides are kind of creating these different factions and fissures. And so that's an example, I think, in politics. We're definitely seeing it in content.
Yeah, the internet's turning into a weird place, giving these niches like a voice. And I guess the other thing I should have asked my Jake Paul question better was, he has this comment of like, I'm going to be the first social media billionaire, which to me, I'm like, dude, you're going to be like 100 billionaire, the first real social media. Probably won't be Jake Paul, but like the ability for one person to be that brand that's as big as Comcast, NBC, ABC, or like, I don't know if maybe YouTube, Twitter, and
Yeah.
Instagram or the NBC, but I thought that was a powerful, when I heard him say that, I was like, man, I'm so pumped. I'm not working for like Goldman, and I'm on the independent creator
Yeah.
side of the financial world, because that's where the chips are going to fall. And I feel like he's doing that for the media world, where Jerry Seinfeld had the #1 show and made 50 million. And, you know, even inflation adjusted, Jake Paul's going to make 50x that with the #1 show, even though it's more fragmented and not even as much of the cultural zeitgeist is tuning into him as was Seinfeld in that moment. But yet
Yeah.
he's able to leech 10 times more value than Jerry Seinfeld did. If
Yeah.
that's kind of, you know, and to me, this is fascinating. And as like me personally in that space, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do a boxing match, but I'm going to set up my VC syndicate group to start writing startup checks with me. And that's going to be my way that I hit $1 billion with my social media. So it's all, I love the creativity of it when you're an entrepreneur. And that's why, as much as I hate like Jake Paul, I don't hate Jake Paul actually. Like, his content's crazy. Like, he's out there. Like, I'm not a fan. I don't like support him really, but like, I really respect him as a business guy. And I'm like, you are a visionary in becoming that social media billionaire and setting yourself up for that and making the right moves and doing the content. Like, hate on him all you want. The dude is incredibly successful and way bigger than me, and kind of like is doing something really right that I think people are going to be really smart to kind of copy and follow.
Well, I think what you bring up a good point is that, you know, it used to be you would be an artist, you'd be a creator, and that was all you did. That's all you were known for. And this has been an emerging trend over the last, you know, handful of years. It's definitely here to stay, and like a big part of the VC landscape, at least, is, you know, think about people like influencers, creators, celebrities. They're becoming investors. They're becoming business people, right? Not just artists in their specific categories, their specific channels, or their lanes. Like, a good example of this, I think it was a couple of days ago, Step announced a fundraising, and Charlie D'Amelio was like one of the first names listed, right? Like, she's investing in this app, or not, it's not an app, but in this company. And we're seeing this happen, like NBA athletes, right, that are investing in companies, that are starting like their own funds and to invest in companies and you know, different opportunities. It's again, it's leveraging a personal brand to unlock all these other like monetization avenues. Yeah, I agree with you. Like, you know, I think you have that platform, take full advantage of it, and take ownership of like what you're creating, what you've built for yourself. And I agree. Like, I think maybe it's not Jake Paul, but I think we're absolutely going to see a lot of value created.
And I'm curious, kind of like to wrap it up, one thing that I say to all my friends is like, everyone should start a YouTube channel. Like, I've been kind of like joking about that since I started mine, but I really do feel like everyone, if you want, is this crazy business opportunity to find your niche, to kind of be yourself, and to use, like we're talking about, all of these tools. Maybe you won't be a billionaire, but maybe you'll make $100,000 a year, and that's way better than the current job you have. And so I'm kind of curious of it, tying it back, maybe not in the crazy influencer way. And maybe this is like, from the VC world, there's, you know, what do I think comes to mind here? Patreon, because they're the platform that enables that long tail of micro creators. And so I think the influencer economy, in some ways, it gets a bad rap because, like, influencer, it feels like you're getting for clout. It's kind of like this clickbait BS thing. But really, influencer just, to me, means more authentic thought leaders than ever are emerging in a new platforms, and they're winning. So this is a huge opportunity for anyone in any category, in any niche that they're passionate about, to radically use this, like, to me, trillions of dollars of companies, of market cap, of platforms that you are all for free, that you could put your content on. So that's kind of my pitch to everyone at the end of the day, is like, and then in 5 years, you'll have Genies will be out of beta, and you can have your own digital that'll be getting higher margins. Like, you know, this kind of like, we're just so early in the monetization of how this is spreading.
Well, I love that you brought up Patreon. We're thrilled to be partners with Jack and team there. We think, I mean, everything you just said, we agree with the thesis. If you think about, especially with, you know, think about the tailwinds of COVID and how much time people have on their hands now. And, you know, back to 2008, 2009, the last kind of major crisis we had in the financial markets. And you look at that time period, really is the birth of Uber and Airbnb, two massive technology companies today, right? And they were built around this opportunity of people looking for, you have this asset, multiple assets, a time and a car, or it's time and a spare room in my house, right? And you have this need with, you know, when the financial crisis hits, people have more time on their hands. They have a need for additional income. And these companies created opportunities for people to monetize, their time and an asset in ways that didn't exist before. The same thing is happening now, unfortunately, with COVID, right? A lot of people have been impacted by it. But what you think about a silver lining, it creates an opportunity for people to explore a passion that maybe they didn't have the time to do before, right? And companies like Patreon, channels like YouTube, these methods of distribution for content and monetization, you can build a community of people now around a followership. And maybe it's not, as you put out, maybe it's not hundreds of thousands of people, but maybe it's an audience of 15 or 20, right? That are really passionate about what you're doing, and they're going to support you. Like I have a few on Patreon, a few people that I support. One of them is like maybe an audience of 15 people. We just buy sheets of music, piano sheet music from this one person, right? And it's not a huge business, but it's amazing content. And, I really like it. And so I want to support that content. And Patreon enables that type of, kind of peer-to-peer almost value for value, which I think is so powerful. And I think, if it's just one person who can follow a passion now that they weren't able to do before, but now it's authentic and they have time to do it. And they have these tools that allow them to capture value for the value they're creating. It's a huge opportunity. And we're thrilled to be partners with companies like Patreon to go and enable this for people.
Dude, and you said something, I can't let it go, the Patreon. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jack. We had him on Hyperchange, like honored to be able to talk to him. And I feel like what you said, like you paid a couple bucks a month and you supported that piano, whatever thing, like that is such powerful direct support. Like I have a Patreon and that's the whole reason I've been able to do everything with Hyperchange. Like it makes it all possible. It makes the reason why I can do the show for free, and people who can't pay are allowed to watch it because some people want to pay just because they're nice. And like, they are like, yeah, I could support this, but like that $5 for Galley goes such a long way. You know what I mean? Like that $10 for your piano guy, like that's all he needed to buy sheet music. And like, to me, it was so frustrating that wasn't unlocked before, but that's why Patreon is like $100 billion or $1 trillion company. If they can just execute on this thesis of, allowing artists and creators to monetize their work and just be that toll road of the platform that allows them to, because I don't know. And it makes me really excited because that's one thing I'm passionate about is like not enough art, not enough exciting stuff. We're not paying artists enough. And that's why our cities are ugly. There's parking lots everywhere. Architecture is not dope. People are all wearing the same clothes. Like we just have a huge knob to crank in terms of creativity, art, and culture. And Patreon is to me like pushing that forward in such a huge way. And like personally, obviously really passionate about it, but that's why I'm a huge fan. That's, I think, going to be a home run for your team.
Well, when we heard, the thing I think back to when Jack came in and presented to our partnership, and the thing that jumped off the page for me more than anything was just his natural, authentic, like just passion for this. The company was built because he lived this problem, right? He made this music video and he wanted to share it with people. And he spent a ton of money because he wanted it to be beautiful and like it mattered to him and his band. And there was no way to really monetize it, right? So he solved, and this is what we absolutely love at NEA. It's why I love venture capital. People solving problems that they have themselves, and in those problems, people realize people are facing them like beyond just themselves, and that becomes a huge company, right? Where it solves problems that people didn't even know they had. What a great example of that, like with Patreon, and now you're able to take advantage of it, and hundreds of thousands of other people as well with their own personal businesses and projects. It's just amazing, right? And that's, I think, the power of community. Patreon is a great example of that.
Dude, such a great place to end it. Well, do you have any final predictions that you want to leave us with, Luke? Or maybe we'll just catch up next time in the influencer economy, see how little Michaela's doing. But
yeah, well, you mentioned Jake Paul being the first, what'd you say, billion? Was that the number
like social media billionaire? I think he's thrown that out. Yeah.
I'm going to say Charlie D'Amelio is going to be the first one.
Wow. Okay. Honestly, I'm not going to hate on that. Yeah, she's killing it. She was the fastest to 100 million.
In like 10 years to know if that's true or not. It might take some time, but
dude, at this rate, like 2022 probably. Like, you know. Dude, thank you so much for joining the show, taking the time, Luke. Really appreciate it. I'll put your info, NEA, and your personal Twitter down below so people can check out your stuff and follow you more. But really appreciate the time. Have an awesome day.
Awesome. Thanks, man.
Peace.